You continue to make changing the state's policy of issuing driver's licenses to illegal immigrants a top priority, even though your effort to change the law failed in the legislature last year. Why is this issue so important to you, and how do you plan to convince the legislature this year to adopt a law banning the practice?
It's important to me because it's important to New Mexicans. 72% of New Mexicans support the repeal of that law, and I have been elected to do the people's business. And so it's important to me to have the legislature understand that New Mexicans want this law repealed because it is a public safety issue. We have people coming from all over the world to the state of New Mexico for the sole purpose of getting a valid U.S. ID and then leaving the state. So there are people here who live here and are getting their license with valid documentation, and then we have a large group of people who are being trafficked here by individuals who are charging illegal immigrants anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 to then provide them with fraudulent documents, documents that claim they live in New Mexico, documents that claim they have bank accounts in New Mexico, documents that claim they work here, when in fact they don't. They will be here for all of a day, go into motor vehicle department, get their driver's license, and then leave. What also causes a problem in public safety is that then that driver's license can be exchanged in a different state for their driver's license. And then that person, if they're here to work and do good things, or if they're here to cause harm, we don't know the difference. And so then that person exchanges a New Mexico driver's license for, let's say, an Arizona driver's license, a Colorado driver's license, and we will never know that person is here illegally.
Yeah. Where do you get the 72% support?
It came out, there was a poll done by the Albuquerque Journal, and they did a poll where 72% of all New Mexicans are in favor of the repeal of that law.
Do you recall when that was? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think it was in February.
Before the beginning of the session?
No, it was during the session.
During the session.
It was during the session. Yep.
Any more questions?
And I will tell you, just to, so you understand, the House passed the repeal of the law, and then it did not get, it got to the Senate floor, but it would not get called up. I think the biggest problem is that, politics, people who represent the people need to understand what the people want them to do, and they need to do what their constituents want them to do. It's not up to them. They are representatives of the people, and that's what I'm trying to do is represent them as they've asked me to.
So how do you convince the Senate? You've talked about having a special session on that issue. How do you convince the Senate this time to do your bidding on this issue?
What we do is, what's important and what we started to do during the session is we started to bring the people to the process. And by that I mean we were informing the communities where the legislators come from that this was a topic, this was a bill that was being considered by the legislature, and that they needed to call in and let their legislators know what it was they wanted them to do. Because within the roundhouse in Santa Fe, there may be people who come and will say, we don't want this law, but we have such a large state that people can't afford to be there for days and days waiting for this to hit a calendar. And also they're working, they're busy. So what we started to do was to make sure they knew that they could call in a particular number. They knew that they could contact their legislator by email, by telephone, however it was, and ask them to do whatever they wanted them to do. And they did. I mean, they started to receive hundreds and hundreds of phone calls when we let the public know you can be heard and this is how you get heard. I think we're just going to continue to do the very same thing and bring the people to the process and say, let your legislators know what you want them to do.
So you're sure to have a special session on this issue in the fall?
Yes.
Do you know the dates yet?
No, not yet. We are almost, it's going to be in early September, early to mid-September. Okay. And so we're putting together a very short agenda for that purpose.
All right, next question. The AYP is an annual concern, and that just came out recently. Most public educators agree it's a faulty measurement of student and school progress. The state has proposed changing the measurement to a grading system. How is that a better system to ensure children in New Mexico schools are not only getting a quality education, but one that will prepare them for the future?
Well, there was a bill that passed this session that did, what allows now to do is to grade schools in a way that's understandable by everyone. Businesses, parents, school teachers, anybody, and it's an A through F, instead of the terms that are used currently, such as proficiency, near proficiency, proficiency 1, 2, I mean, a terminology that is not understood by everyone. That bill did pass. What that's going to do is let us measure progress, not just where are you today. So if you walk into a classroom and your school is graded a D, let's say, we're going to concentrate on the lower 25% performing students and start providing resources to those children. And it doesn't matter the color of your skin. All that matters is, are you of the lower 25% performing students, and what resources are we going to give to those students and to that school to move it from that D to a C. We're going to measure progress, not just have you hit the AYP level, because you're right, that doesn't measure the progress. It's a pass or fail kind of grading system. So you have 36 factors in AYP. You don't make one, you have failed AYP. And so we're not measuring progress of students that have gone from a second grade reading level to a third grade reading level when they're already in the fourth grade. That's progress that we need to capture and reward someone for. And we want to make sure also in future bills that we want to propose is that social promotion and prevent social promotion. Because we do have kids that go from the third to the fourth grade and they haven't mastered the skill of reading. And if you can't read, then you can't learn. And you start to learn by reading starting in the fourth grade on. So you end up with kids in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade that are reading at the 2nd and 3rd grade level. Eventually in the 9th grade, we have the dropout rate that starts all the way to almost 35 to 40% of our kids dropping out. And so AYP is not measuring progress, but it does tell us whether or not our students are at the grade level they should be. So what I am proposing is short cycle assessments, the ability to test children as they go along throughout the year. We should never find out in July that 83% of our students in the previous year did not master the basic skills of that grade, but are on to the next. And that's what AYP is doing. We're not learning those results soon enough for it to impact curriculum.
So you'll be announcing results like quarterly, or how?
Well, no, what they're done is actually, and I'll tell you about a school that I went to that used this sort of short cycle assessment process. Kids will check out books from a library, and the back of the book of the library of the school has a sticker on it, and it'll say, for example, 3.7. That means that's a 3rd grade 7-month level reading level book. And I went into this school, and it was 77% of the children in that school were poverty level, and over 60% were minorities. So I went in and I asked this classroom, and I said, tell me how many of you read at the 3rd grade level? And only about 5 or 6 kids raised their hand. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, they really are just struggling. And then I started to hear kids' voices. One little boy said, but I read at 4.2. Another one said, but I read it at 4.7. The last kid that I finally heard from, she said, I read at 5.9. And I didn't quite understand. I said, how do you know you read at 5.9? How did you get there? Every day, kids have to check out, they have a book that they've checked out, they have to read 20 pages at home. And they come back, they only have 3 computers in their classroom of about 22 kids. Throughout the day, they're going to get on that computer. At one point, they enter the name of the book, and they put down the pages that they read. Then the computer starts to ask them questions to measure their reading comprehension, their ability to recall what they've read, etc. And then at the end, out comes a report. And the report will then assess how many questions they got right. Did they understand what the story was telling them? And they do this every single day. It takes all of a few minutes. And then before I left, the kids pulled out this notebook out from inside their desks. And it was a kind of a complex report, but they were able to very clearly show me, these are how many, I read 96 books this year. I read at this grade point level. I have a percentage of accuracy to the number of questions that they've answered. I mean, they were doing it with great pride. This is a system that's simple. I mean, it really is very simple and basic. Kids do well with computers now, and it measures, is the teacher on target with her curriculum with these kids, and which ones are struggling. So which ones do I need to concentrate on to make sure we move them up? Or, I've done this for 9 months, is there somebody that needs special help? And for what kind of special help in order for them to read better? There was one student that they were considering holding back out of all of the kids. But she knew every single student and where they stood with reading. So those are the kinds of easy, short cycle assessments that help formulate the curriculum that best help each of the kids individually, not as a whole, individually.
What are your thoughts about how we change AYP standards in New Mexico? Because that is, as you say, one of the issues. If you fail one standard and you have 36, your odds are going to be pretty good.
Well, we haven't progressed at the level that we should have. It is a No Child Left Behind testing assessment, and so it is something that we'll have to have discussions with at the national level, whether or not we receive a waiver from that type of measurement, or do we start to break down at least the categories for AYP a little differently and describing, these 3 categories should never cause you to fail. Sometimes it is the lack of progress in some categories such as children with special needs. And sometimes that category will cause you to fail because they're not measuring progress or not. I believe all kids can progress, even with disabilities, but they're not capturing it in this kind of testing. And if they did capture progress, then I think they could make AYP.
Okay, next question. As far as the going into the legislature in the upcoming year, will the budget be a big issue, and what does state finances look like?
Well, let's see. In January, when we first took office, unemployment was at 8.4. Unemployment, as of a couple of days ago, is at 6.8. In parts of the state, it's even lower than that. In the southeast, it's 4.9.
We're in the fours here.
Yeah, it's amazing. In some parts of the state, they're doing much better. The budget will always be an issue. And I think it'll always be an issue because when revenues are generated and there seems to be additional funding available, there always seems to be a tendency for people wanting to spend it. If you have it, spend it all. And that is one thing that we are not willing to do. We want to make sure that the size of government is at a level that the population and inflation require, and not let's grow programs, let's grow more things, let's expand on government just because this year we have money, and the next year if we don't have as much, we're back to sizing down. Only what is necessary. We have to have a good educational system, and we have to provide for it. We have to have a good Medicaid system for those that are most in need, and one that lasts long term. We have to have good public safety. There are core missions of state government, but I think we're going to have to constantly, even when we're doing well, is fight the desire to spend everything that we make.
Could give it back to you.
Yes, you could. That's exactly right. And I think that's what's going to be one of the more important things that we're going to be facing next year in January is going to be, we've already started the tax reform and looking at all the taxes across the board and how do we impact the greater number of folks, especially those that are the small businesses that hire 5, 6, 7 employees. How do we impact them in a way that they'll go out and hire an additional person? And what we're doing is looking at how we make proposals to the legislature to cut back on the taxes when we have an excess of revenue. And I think we're going to have about the top 5 or 6 good reforms that are going to impact several, especially the small businesses. We think that that's one area that has never had a fair playing field and have never had their taxes really looked at and reduced. Or the families, keep more of your own money. Why are we keeping that in government and growing? But that's something that hasn't been looked at in about 15 years at the code overall, and that's what we're doing now.
The last 2 are a little more local. You have to choose the new district judge to replace Judge Orlick, and we're wondering who your choice is, if you know. If not, when will you be letting people know? What are some qualities you're looking for?
I have not interviewed them. I personally interview every judicial candidate. I come from the legal field, and so I have appeared in front of many, many judges. And so I have an idea of the type of judge that I would like to see on any bench in New Mexico. Number one is knowledgeable. And if not knowledgeable in the area they're assigned, someone who is very bright and smart, who can learn it quickly, a person of honor, a person with patience, because there are many more cases nowadays with civilians, of people without lawyers appearing in court, especially like for divorces and things like that, where you have to have a very patient judge who has to help explain the law because there aren't lawyers involved on both sides all the time. I would like to see a judge who is willing to work extremely hard and apply the law as it's written and not create law. Because really it's not about the judge, it's about how the law is interpreted and applied to the parties. But at the end of the day, the greatest quality is a person of good character.
Do you know all four of the candidates?
Pardon?
Do you know all four?
Anyway, as you know, there was a $5 million allocation promised for cannon expansion by the legislature, and the Public Lands Commissioner has expressed that he wants expansion of the range to take place through a lease agreement with the state. If it is handled through a lease rather than a purchase, it has been said that there may be as much as $2 million left from the legislature allocation, and that you can direct that money. You can direct how that money is purposed. What, if any, decisions have you made for the use of those excess funds?
We haven't made any final decisions. We are having conversations with the leadership of the county as well as with leadership from the Cannon Air Force Base. It is a special operations mission Air Force Base, and I think that's what's going to be extremely important, is that we make sure that the facility itself is safe. Mm-hmm. There is a roadway, Road R, I think, County Road R, that is right up against the land of the facility. And as they are building new buildings and getting closer to that road, and with the landing, what do they call it? Where the airplanes are landing, the landing strips. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is provide a buffer space between the facility itself and how close vehicles can pass right by that facility, and within seconds break through a fence and get onto the facility. And that facility is, people know where it is and what the mission is. And the mission is special operations. And they know that they have those special planes that are remotely operated. And so we've got to do everything, I think, to make sure that it is safe. But we're looking to see if that is something that the community wants, to either move that road a mile down or not, and if there's a way that the state can help in doing that.
What have you heard from the big Air Force as opposed to just special ops in that regard?
Our understanding is that securing the facility and providing that space is important to them as well.
Timeline on when you're going to decide what you're going to do?
No, we have had conversations as recent as today, and as far back as about probably 3 months ago. And so we are looking at that for the financial support for the movement of that road. That is a priority, huge priority, I know, for the Air Force Base, just because it is just so close to the perimeters of the building, of the facility. So I don't have a timeline for you. I'm hopeful that we will do it in the very soon coming months, because they're growing and building, and you can never move fast enough for the safety of that facility.
Did you also
talk about politically your relationship with the legislature and where you see that going? It was a little rocky at times, and how do you address that as you go forward with a special session and then the next regular session? Well,
I know that there are special interests from the various legislators, and I think what's important is for the legislators and I to work together in the areas that we can compromise in, such as we compromise in the social promotion bill. It did not get passed, however. We compromised that it not include the 5th grade and the 8th grade. And we said we would compromise and only it affect the 3rd grade. We compromised on the film industry bill that it would remain at the 25% subsidy level, but we would cap it at $50 million, when in fact we were hoping initially through the executive to bring it down 15% without a cap, and so we compromised there. We also compromised in areas of the budget. We made sure, one, that we were going to balance the budget, but I had proposed, for example, a $10 million increase in Medicaid. The legislature only increased by $6 million. Well, keep in mind there's a $3 to $1 match for each of those, so Medicaid would have increased by $40 million had it been the proposal that I had made. They wanted cuts in other places, and so I think throughout the whole process we were compromising. There are a couple of areas, for example, the driver's licenses, that I won't compromise. When you have 72% of New Mexicans saying repeal that law, I've had individual legislators tell me how I may need to stop campaigning, that I need to start governing. And I didn't understand what that legislator really meant by that. And I kept asking, I said, well, explain that to me. What does that mean? He says, look, you made promises that you were going to do A, B, C, D when you ran for office. And you did that for 16 months, but you just got to set that aside, and now you just got to have to govern. And I said, but isn't that the problem? Is that people, when they get elected, they forget what they got elected for, what they said that got them elected. And now isn't it time for me to deliver on the things I said I was going to do? And that's why I think some of the if there were bumps in the road, was because I was sticking to what I felt got me elected and people wanted me to do in governing. And I never separated the two. I never forgot what I said I would do. And so at the end of the day, I think we accomplished quite a bit when we balanced the budget, especially when we did not raise taxes in doing so. There was a proposal for a $128 million increase in unemployment insurance taxes that I refused to sign. I think they were receiving information that was inaccurate. Now we know that that unemployment insurance fund will last until March of 2013. And because we have unemployment that is dropping, we have more people going back to work, we have a smaller pool of individuals that qualify for unemployment insurance. So I think we had the good debates that needed to be had, but I think there was lots of evidence that I'm willing to compromise when at the end of the day it's in the best interest of New Mexicans. And I think it's always healthy to have those debates with the legislature. I mean, there's a Democrat House of Representatives and a Democrat Senate, and I'm a Republican, and so I have to get things through a legislature that they are a majority. The Democrats are a majority, and so of course there's going to be disagreement. I have no doubt, but I think that if we worked on what we agreed on, what we can agree on, we can come to some big changes in education and economic development in big ways if we just keep our eyes on who we represent.
And speaking of that, New Mexico in the east isn't represented by a rail runner and a spaceport. Talk about those issues as you go forward. And we need more roads paved in the state, but we're paying for a rail runner that's ridden by very few people.
Yeah.
And we have a spaceport, but we can't get from one side of the state to the other without running into enormous potholes and rivers of pavement based on the heat we've gone through in the latest drought and just the wear and tear in between repairs.
Certainly the rail runner has been or was a project that is going to cost us till 2027. It has been bonded for a very long period of time, as did the GRIP program. It is a program that people think costs only $437 million, when at the end of the day, when you bond something till 2027, it is costing us well over $1 billion between maintenance, repairs, and the bonding that the payments that have to be made. Over $40 million a month are made, a year are made on the bonding payments have to be made just on the bonding. Then you have the repairs, etc. It was not well thought out. It takes longer to take the rail runner from point A to point B, from one end of the rail runner to the other. People can drive faster, carpool easier. But it is a project that we either decide we're going to throw away $800 million because we're going to be bonded. It's bonded till the 2027. There's nothing we can do about that. Or we start to look at how we make it more efficient. How do we get more riders on it? It is public transportation, so it's never meant to pay for itself. But it is paying very little of what it should for public transportation. And Spaceport, the counties, they opened it up for the 3 counties to pay the taxes in order to provide the tax dollars for it in 3 different counties. 2 of them passed it, the 3rd one did not. And so what we're hoping to do is bring the private enterprise to Spaceport so that it's more self-sufficient and not reliant totally on state government like it is. We have to bring other entities, research, whether it be other entities that need to come, and Economic Development Cabinet Secretary John Barella is certainly working on that. But we're also digging through a couple of years worth of what has been going on here in this project and has it been efficient, and have the monies that have been spent been efficiently done so. I'm not sure that we're completely satisfied yet where it is, and then now that we have it stable, how do we start adding to it? No, and you're right. I mean, down here in the east side of the state, you don't benefit from any of them, but you do.
I think last question for you is on the bigger national scene and what it means to New Mexico. We're now in the last moments of chaos with what's going on in D.C. for this moment anyhow, and then who knows if it'll surface again in a few more months. If the U.S. gets into the default situation, what will that mean for New Mexico, and are you looking at what has to be done in that instance from a state impact?
From a state impact, we have looked at the situation to see what we would do, and we are prepared to meet our obligations for about 22 days.
What does that mean?
Well, we wouldn't be receiving any funds from the federal government in order to pay for federal services or grants or any of the things that we use federal funds for. Checks wouldn't be written or couldn't be written or backed up. We have set aside funding from the reserves to be able to meet those obligations and giving the federal government the opportunity to come to a decision. I do believe that they will come to a conclusion or come to a decision before the deadline. If they don't, the consequences are enormous, and they know that. They understand it. So it is, I really do feel that they will come to a compromise, and that we will not have to make those kind of decisions where we're not receiving that kind of funding.
As part of that whole economic impact, New Mexico has investments which could be hammered if they're in the wrong part of the stock or bond market. Has that been looked at, and is money being moved around to protect? Not that I'm aware of. That I am the chairman of the SIC, and in fact we just had a meeting yesterday, State Investment Council, and there aren't funds that are being moved around in preparation for this, because sometimes that kind of impulsive movement of investments can also be detrimental. So we have not, we have prepared though to continue to meet our obligations for about 20+ days in case it happens and they come to, let's say, a decision a week later or 2 weeks later. But as far as the movement of investments, because of what's happening right now, no.